Resident Evil 2 is perhaps one of the more popular entries in the franchise to date. With Resident Evil 4 aside it, there's quite a lot of events and a very important one that kickstarted off all this zombie apocalypse that happens across the world. In this particular game, you will know some of the most iconic moments in this franchise. But let's get to the most exciting part, shall we? Resident Evil 2 has been remastered, and as you would expect, it does contain quite a lot of things if you played Resident Evil 2 back in the heydays. Now, there are obviously a few changes that comes along with that remaster, and I'll get to that in a sec. But first, if you aren't familiar with Resident Evil 2 in general, but you have played the other Resident Evil games, then let me tell you, this is where some of the most iconic characters make their mark. And I'm talking about two in particular, Leon Scott Kennedy and Claire Redfield. Now, let's start off with Leon Kennedy, and he's been in one of the other very popular Resident Evil game, Resident Evil 4, and in this Resident Evil 2, he's younger, inexperienced, naive, and I've enjoyed playing this guy, and he's sort of like the rookie police you expect him to be. You know, he has a bit of idealism, I suppose, and this is perhaps where you come to see one of his most well woven relationships in this series, and that is Ada Wong. Now, the first thing you'll notice is that this is a very interesting way of how they built this relationship between them. And once you navigate through Leon's story, and you know, I've played this sneak peek for a couple of hours, I was very interested to see how all this sort of like Batman and Catwoman sort of relationship kicked off. Needless to say, there were some interesting or more like overused tropes, and to be fair, like, this is a pretty classic game when it comes to that horror survival thing. And what they essentially did was they kept the horror, the atmosphere, all that scarce resource use in this game, and it felt like you still got this survival aspect. It's not like this shootout in Resident Evil 6 or so. However, they did smooth things out. They smoothed out the inventory, the movement. It doesn't feel as clunky. In fact, I'd say it has the movement of an action game, but it has the feel, the atmosphere, the workings of a horror survival game. And that's what I got from Leon's playthrough. And I did enjoy this the most in this sneak peek. Now, let's get on to his fellow protagonist. And she is not as well known as Leon, but that doesn't make her any less iconic, and that is Claire Redfield. Now, her name sounds quite familiar if you played Resident Evil quite a lot, and if you're not familiar with Resident Evil 2, she is the sister of Chris Redfield. Now, she's a bit more fiery, red, like, she's kind of like the fighter, like she's a powerhouse in her own right, and she is quite interesting. I like to see her interact with some of the more crazy villains. Now, I don't want to reveal too much. This is something that especially if you haven't played it, this is something you have to see how she develops, how the characters around her develop, and needless to say that she gets quite a bit of her own action, well, at least from the gameplay I played. And, you know, she's got crazy equipment at the time, so expect some interesting puzzle solving, but at the same time, a lot of badass fighting and explosions and all that kind of stuff. And, well, you'll see more when you start seeing crazier enemies as you go along. Now, overall, this game has nailed the horror aspect, as I mentioned before, and it's not just because of the feel of the game. The aesthetics, especially the visuals, they look smoother, and it feels a bit more constricting at times where, oh dear, like, you know, the shadows are closing in, there's a bit of suspense. Well, especially if you haven't played it before, the suspense is real, and it would make you regret not playing the original Resident Evil 2 for so long. On top of that, the audio, the music is well on spot. It's pretty fun, and the voice acting felt pretty strong as well. Now, the best part about the gameplay is the limited resources. Of course, you know, Resident Evil is perhaps a game or a franchise that rewards you to explore and, you know, find the best gear that's hidden around. Now, I've tried it out. I've majorly enjoyed it, but there is one small gripe, and of course, not every game is perfect, but it is perhaps the way the camera handles. Now, to be fair, this is more of a subjective pet peeve rather than an objective one, but it did feel like there are times where, you know, when you go through an action sequence or something like that, the camera sort of jerks around, and
what the hell is up with you?
It might be a case of you need to get used to it kind of thing, but that's just my only gripe. Overall, I've enjoyed every minute of playing this game, and it is definitely, the sneak peek definitely made me regret not playing Resident Evil 2, the original one, when I had the chance. So, all I can say is, you know, the hype is really real. It looks like it's gonna live up to it once it comes out. I mean, give it a whirl. This is definitely a game to keep an eye on. I'm Roger from Games Classified, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see more content like this or other interesting tidbits and other pieces, then please come take a look at our channel and consider liking and subscribing, anything that tickles your fancy.